Hey, hi. Welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner, senior film writer for Now Magazine, and this is the other thing I do. My guest on this special TIFF bonus episode is Molly McGlynn, a writer and director whose filmography includes the radically different but equally satisfying shorts Given Your History and Three-Way Not Calling, featuring friends of the show Katie Boland and Christian Brun, respectively, and the web series How to Buy a Baby. Her first feature is the funny, moving drama Mary Goes Round, starring Aya Cash and Sarah Weisglass, and it's making its world premiere this Saturday, September 9th, at 3 p.m. at the TIFF Bell Lightbox. You should go. Molly picked American Beauty, Sam Mendes' 1999 Oscar winner starring Kevin Spacey as a middle-aged man who sends his entire neighborhood spinning into chaos when he abandons his identity as a comfortable suburbanite and starts acting like the younger man he desperately still wishes to be. 18 years after its first TIFF screenings, the film, which also stars Annette Bening, Chris Cooper, Wes Bentley, Thora Birch, and Mina Suvari, plays very differently now, but at the time of its premiere, it exploded like a cultural landmine, winning the festival's People's Choice Award and setting itself up for Oscar glory. And all because of a goddamn plastic bag. This is Someone Else's Movie.
Well, I'm kind of surprised that I picked American Beauty, because I saw like a couple titles on your shelf already that I was like, damn it, should have done that, damn it.
That happens.
Like even beginners. I was like, oh. But I think this is a very unoriginal reason. But I think it was the first movie for me in high school was when it came out in 99.
Right.
So that was, I think it was like a theater class where we had 1 week dedicated to film, and this was in suburban New Jersey, and she wheeled out the thing with the TV and the VHS, and we watched it. And, you know, when I'm looking back, I was probably grade 9, so I was 13 at the time. So this was, you know, thematically, that teacher was kind of pushing it a little bit.
She was a little ahead of the curve, I would think.
Yeah. Totally. But it was the first time I became aware that I was watching, this is going to sound very pretentious, that I was watching a film and not a movie. And it was the first time that I was no longer just a passive consumer of entertainment, and I became engaged in this kind of intellectual way. And that probably has so much to do with the point in my time and my, you know, cognitive development where this was meeting. But, you know, of course, I emotionally connected to a lot of things. Lady and the Tramp could have been an option for us to talk about, but thought we'd have more to speak about with American Beauty. But
I don't know. Lady and the Tramp has all that stuff about the mistreatment of animals. And
yes,
there's stuff there are roads you could explore.
Yeah, I'm not going to fuck with that. And I think part of me was that kind of angsty teenage girl who's, you know, locked in what she thought was miserable at the time, and looking back was, of course, very, to some degree, privileged, etc. And probably the first time I used motif in a sentence was related to some sort of paper essay I wrote on this, you know, like motifs of roses, and like thinking I was so intelligent and like ahead of the curve. But, you know, I was reading about it this morning, kind of just seeing what people have written on it since then, because at that time, obviously, access to internet was different, and I just liked it because I liked it. But now there's a few pieces that were very like, American Beauty's the worst film ever, and you know, Lester Burnham is the worst, and he's basically modern day Humpert and all this stuff.
And he's not the worst, but I think that it's a good example of when internet culture demonstrated its ability to be incredibly toxic and incredibly enabling at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe enabling is the wrong word. Empowering, but it is exactly the sort of movie that you can interpret in any direction. And if you choose to hate it, you can find a lot of stuff in there worth hating. Mm-hmm. And I saw it at TIFF, actually. It was either it must have been the first weekend of TIFF. On the Friday, I think, there was a press screening of this at 7, and then at 9:30 we all had to run uptown to see Snow Falling on Cedars.
Okay, right.
A great, forgotten, terrible Scott Hicks adaptation. That was awful.
Yeah.
But compared to that, and just on its own, this felt pretty good. This felt like it's a clear directorial voice. It's a little obnoxious, but I think it's supposed to be. I don't think you're supposed to root for Lester necessarily.
Yeah.
And Spacey's performance is absolutely, pissy. He's not, he's nobody's hero but his own. Mm-hmm. And watching two things happen, watching half the room just go for it, myself included, because it's like, oh, where are we going to end up? This could be interesting. And yeah, the ending is a little bit, more than a little bit manipulative, and it's one of those classic third act things where, if people just talk to each other for 5 seconds, none of this would proceed.
Right, exactly.
But that's kind of the point of the movie, that nobody talks to anybody else. So by that point, I was okay with it, and I wasn't going to completely disconnect from the movie.
Right.
Whereas other people were just furious over, I get the total betrayal of Chris Cooper's character. It's like, well, no, that's a pretty clear portrait of self-loathing. Like, it's all about, everybody hates themselves in this movie. And maybe if you go in with the idea, oh, well, the suburbs are upset, that's a big new revelation. Like, if you're going in with a sarcastic point of view, or you're not prepared to explore the idea that, yes, it's a cliche, but this is why it's a cliche.
Exactly. Yeah, and also, like, stuff I was reading today, the comments on this woman, I think it was from some online decider or something like that, but the comments of people were like, from, to your point, like a directorial debut from Sam Mendes, like, I thought it was extremely strong. And Alan Ball, I'm a huge fan of.
Oh, yeah.
6 Feet Under is, if you asked me the TV show that kind of turned my head in a similar way, it would be 6 Feet Under.
Okay.
Not
True Blood? I mean, just,
no,
going
specifically
along the
6
line.
Feet Under for sure. But, yeah, a funny story about this. Probably the worst film to ever watch with your father when you're a teenage girl is American Beauty.
I can see that.
Yeah, my parents were divorced, and I was visiting him, and I have no idea, like, why. But it was my stepmother, my dad, and I watching this, and yeah, that was extremely uncomfortable. I think he just was like, I'm going to bed, and then put us all out of the misery of being 15 and watching a total perv on screen,
At what point did he check out? Was it before the fantasy sequence?
I cannot remember. It's probably just blacked out due to trauma.
Okay.
Cannot recall.
This is going to resurface in a script 3 or 4 years from now.
Yes.
It's like, oh, that's where that came from.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, I was there for the moment where everybody catalyzed around it. It became the movie to talk about and the movie to see. And weirdly, this was... I mean, the fall of 99 was the fall of Three Kings and Magnolia, and, well, Christmas too, but...
Fight Club, too,
Fight
was
Club,
around that time.
and Being John Malkovich.
It's a good time.
It was...
Good time to be a movie.
Hugely, the new American cinema was basically happening right there. And everybody battened onto this because I think it felt like the most conventional of them. It was the safest, but it's not about safety at all. It's about how desire destroys you and freedom isn't free. I mean, it's a lot of simplistic sloganeering, but I thought it was played realistically. I don't have a problem with Annette Bening being quite so angry all the time because she's in a marriage that isn't working. Like every cartoonish depiction of suburbia is justified within the script by something that is emotionally real.
Yeah.
To me, anyway. It all felt very believable.
And to be honest, the town I grew up in the U.S., that was kind of like a commuter town to Manhattan, so of a similar socioeconomic status, and like some of these characters are not far off from that. But Annette Bening's performance, like there's one scene that I still come back to over and over, and I've wondered about, is when she's trying to sell that house to that, I think it's a lesbian couple. I think at one point
it's
they're like, oh, lesbians, we're ready for this. But they try to, or she tries to sell the house to them, and it doesn't go well because it's just shithole. And then she loses her shit in that wide shot against the drapes. Yeah. And then she just adjusts her pencil skirt and then walks off camera. And I've always wondered, like, when you watch things, is that Annette Bening? Is it who suggested that? Right. Because maybe it's a gendered thing. As a woman, I was like, I just get it. It's the small adjustment before you put the mask back on. So I thought that was brilliant. I loved her.
Yeah, and I don't doubt that Bening has either known women who've been in that situation or have been that woman. Like there's a lived-in nature to that performance that's different from the artifice of Spacey, where he's playing a real character, but he's also making sure that the character is a real character.
Yeah.
You know, like he's pushing it a little bit, and the narration being delivered the way it is a little bit snide, but that's why you cast Kevin Spacey. You don't want him to play a person. You want him to play an idealized version of Kevin Spacey, because that's going to be way more fun and way more seductive in its strange, broken way.
Apparently Jack Lemmon in The Apartment was a reference point for him.
I can see that. He's a huge Lemmon fan.
Yeah, and I guess just like a sense of physicality with the body and whatnot. But, reading about the shooting schedule, because the character has that physical transformation with him working out. The American Woman thing, which apparently was all ad-libbed. But a lot of it was just his posture, because, they didn't shoot in order, as movies are not.
Yeah.
But it was kind of interesting, like, reading about Sam Mendes directing him, because, for instance, the scene where he and Annette Bening are in bed and she's pissed off that he's been jerking off, and then I guess Mendes had asked him for just, like, give me some euphemisms, and he went on for, like, 15 minutes, and Annette Bening just, like, kept cracking up. But speaking about Spacey as someone who's so controlled as an actor, which was perfect for this role, but he didn't say challenge, but a lot of effort on his end went into trying to make him a little less rigid and controlled, and that was kind of an example of a scene where he had asked him to improv a bit, and it worked.
Yeah. He's such an interesting actor when he's looser, when he's... I mean, I like watching him anyway, and this is sort of that peak moment where just before the second Oscar, just before he could do whatever he wanted, and then decided to make stuff like K-Pax for a little while and Pay It Forward, which, we don't speak of. But
Pay It Forward, right?
See?
I think I saw that at a mall when I was a teenager.
Everyone saw it at a mall.
Yeah, with my babysitting money.
Yeah, that was
Wasted.
Like the following year. Oh, really? See,
No.
That would make that
No.
movie
I remember at the time being, I don't know, it was probably like the Catholic schoolgirl in me that was like, this has got a good message, this movie. This is a message movie.
He's a little Jesus.
Mm.
The little Sixth Sense boy.
Too weird. Who's his manager?
Not a good movie. But it's the things those are the movies you make when you want to be loved. And
Right,
the
that's
Kevin
good.
Spacey who doesn't want to be loved, way more fun.
That's a very good point.
Yeah. So everybody does it. Like there's this brief moment where it's either the actor or it's the management saying, like, now, you just won an Oscar for playing the bastard. You should totally play lovable guys for the next 3 years. Or geniuses. Or both. Lovable geniuses.
Yeah.
But, yeah, Spacey, when he doesn't care if you like him and uses that to seduce you as an audience member, that's my favorite one.
Yeah. I love him. There's something that I like, that polish that he has, and that he is seemingly in control watching him all the time. Like he seems like an old movie star in a way that a lot of people aren't.
It's the poise, right? Like he moves like a dancer. I don't know that he is, but he's always kind of sinewy and just slithering through scenes.
Similar, like George Clooney is, I would say, kind of similar, and I mean totally different, but they have that slithery dancer kind of old Hollywood star vibe.
It's confidence and tailoring.
Yeah, tailoring for sure. I remember, this is total diversion, but seeing a TIFF interview with Clooney where whoever from E-Talk said, who are you dating? And he just said, with this, like, George Clooney smile, he said, who are you dating? And totally disarmed her and moved on. And I was like, that's someone who's a brilliant movie star. There's a way to shut it down.
Yeah.
And still be charming. And he just turned it on her, which I thought was brilliant.
It's good. And it's somebody who's been practiced at that. Like, he's had to develop the defense mechanism.
Yeah, for sure.
But without making anybody angry at you, so you can continue to have a relationship with that. That stuff fascinates me, because the only time I interviewed Spacey for any length was in 94 at TIFF. For Swimming with Sharks. Oh, it was great.
I just rewatched Swimming with Sharks recently.
So he's that guy.
Yeah.
Like, that's him.
Really?
It's an unfiltered performance, and he's playing a role, but he has that ability to just turn on and turn off the charm. And it was him and Frank Whaley and me at a table in the Sutton Place restaurant, basically. And they were just quietly quietly but perfectly making fun of everybody who wandered in the door.
Right.
And it was just this big, there were all these celebrity publicists just ushering people in with great big flourishes. And it was just the most pleasurable half hour. We barely talked about the movie.
I bet.
But it was just, I'm going to watch you guys do your little thing. And that sort of spiky world weariness, that thing he can do where he's seen it all. He's disappointed by you personally right now in this moment, but he's going to make the best of it. That, like the thing he does on House of Cards, but he's conspiratorial. He pulls you into whatever the moment is.
Yeah.
And then to see that turn into middle-aged pathos in American Beauty, of course he won the Oscar. It's a role that it's like it's perfect for him.
Yeah.
To show a seedier, sadder version. And while it's also kind of stunty, since he's playing a sympathetic character after stuff like The Usual Suspects and Seven,
right.
and that run that he had, it still works. I mean, I will defend this movie as a perfect product of its time.
Totally. Now, can you imagine pitching? It'd be like, now they'd be pitching an Annette Bening's story. Who's Carolyn Burnham?
I would watch that.
Yeah, I'm gonna do that.
Yeah, I mean, why not? Now it would be Breaking Bad, right? Like it would be when they did the reading. They did the reading at TIFF, the Jason Reitman live read, and they got Cranston to do the role. And it's like, yep, of course they would. Who else would you even think of?
Yeah.
Except that he doesn't win.
Right.
Lester doesn't.
Yeah.
Win anything.
So in some ways, Lester Burnham is kind of a precursor to that character. I never thought of that before. That's cool.
Oh, and Don Draper too. Like anybody who can.
Right, that's all suburban malaise, though.
Yeah, he's the first of this wave. It was just a movie instead of TV, so no one gives it any credit.
Right, and now it's like post 9/11 world, that whole shift, but very close parallels with that. You're smart, Norm.
Well, this is what I do, but. But I've also had time to think about this.
Yeah.
But it is, and it's the kind of movie that was, that's the other thing that happened was that it went on to win picture, director, original screenplay, actor. Was there one other major?
That's as far as I know.
Those are the big ones.
Yeah.
Like maybe cinematography. But this was also the one that sort of galvanized DreamWorks as a distribution force, as a production company, but also that minted TIFF as the place you go to launch your Oscar campaign. True. And changed everything.
That's true.
That year, every major Oscar, except for Best Supporting Actress, which went to Angelina Jolie in Girl Interrupted, went to a movie that played at TIFF, that debuted at TIFF. Boys Don't Cry. Supporting actor was Michael Caine in The Cider House Rules, and American Beauty took everything else.
Right.
And it just, ever since then, the Oscar campaign starts here, which is almost 20 years later now. Look what it's done to the galas and special presentations.
I also read that it was not, like, it wasn't clear for frontrunner.
Yeah, no. That year was, that year was really busy. I mean, there was a lot of great stuff. And I'm still, I don't think Fight Club or Being John Malkovich or Three Kings or Magnolia would have had a shot, really, because they're all just a little bit too unconventional. But then when you look at the breakdown of the nominees, this is the one that's probably, in its supposed edginess, it's also the least offensive to anyone. So it's the crowd pleaser, weirdly enough.
I also wrote some bad papers on Fight Club and broken masculinity. I swear, part of me, just for other people's enjoyment and my own embarrassment, I would just love to upload some of these papers that I wrote, and just it would be very funny to have filmmakers share their film criticism, because it's not, as you know, it's just not the same thing, right? It's like people
look for different stuff. Yeah,
totally. And this is your domain where it's so interesting. The way I speak about it is coming still from a contextual and emotional angle of my own life and my own angst towards my family and, all of that.
But that's what anybody will do when they see a movie. Like your baggage as an audience member, whatever you bring into the theater with you, is naturally going to change the context of the film and make that play or not play. But that's fascinating. Like, that's the best thing. 700 people sit in the dark and everybody has a completely different experience.
700 if you're lucky. Different numbers today.
Yeah, that's true. Now it's small.
One lone person on their couch, hopefully, buying the VOD.
Yeah, how does that change? I mean, a movie like this, for example, I don't know that it would play as well seeing it for the first time in the contemporary situation where there's constant distraction, it would be perceived as really slow because it's gentle in its pacing. And I mean, yes, okay, Wes Bentley would be annoying in any context, but I think, again, he's supposed to be. All these characters are solipsistic and self-absorbed, and they don't know it, which is why they are drawn to one another, why they cling to each other, why they can't communicate with each other. But I can't imagine watching this movie with distractions.
Right. And the score is so great, too.
Yeah.
I feel like
the
that.
Thomas Newman special.
Yeah.
Tinkling, twinkly thing.
Totally.
But it suits this one.
Yeah, it suited it, and for the whole fantasy sequence and whatnot, I thought it was pretty good.
Yeah, it's a movie that I have to admit I hadn't really thought about for 10 years or so, at least. But coming back to it for this was, like, it was actually pleasant. It's like, oh, yeah, that's right. There are things in this that really work. And there's a couple of... There's stuff that's dated. The technology always calls it out.
Yep.
It would be a very different movie in a world of smartphones.
Yep.
But...
Right, so this whole relationship with Angela, Mina Savari's character, would be all online.
Yeah. There'd be a huge social media component. It would be icky and creepy right away. Or he could creep on her without ever actually... talking to her. But
also, interestingly enough, like, the relationships between teenagers changing, like, now teenagers, like, don't even hang out in each other's homes anymore. That's true, right? Yeah. So just the proximity of the other girl in the home, I don't know now.
Yeah, he'd be... I mean, we'd have to rework it so Lester's constantly driving his daughter to places to meet people.
Which I think would make it infinitely more creepy. Right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You just, like, see him in the parking lot, like, at the cheerleading practice.
So did it play as a Lolita situation for you when you were 13? Were you even aware of what that kind of stuff was?
No, not at all.
How did it play? Like, did it feel noble or creepy-ish? Less creepy, more creepy?
It definitely felt creepy, but it's not like I could articulate why or the Lolita connection. But it also, around that age, it is very weird, the lens in which you view your father. And talking to my sisters about the movie, and them just talking about, like, one of their friends when they were younger was over, and then being like, you know, your dad's really hot, and my sister being like, what? And just that perception about your parents changing around that age. But now, viewing it, I have a much harsher lens, obviously, which I'm viewing that dynamic.
Sure.
But I don't know, maybe I should be more offended by it, but I know that it's, yes, it is sexual, but it's not, there's something more to it, and there's a deep yearning that's kind of projected onto sexual fantasy, etc. So I understand it in a different way now as an adult. So I don't know. It doesn't shock me in terms of the taboo nature, and I don't know. There's, like, a lot of young women are, like, frighteningly mature, right? I mean, to me, if anything, that is the scariest angle, is thinking of the Mina Savari character, and I think she's the most interesting, because there's an ability to seduce, and I think women are kind of cultured and raised to posture towards the male gaze, right? And seeing her just perform what she's seen and what she knows, and then when it comes close to materializing the shift into little girl, like, I find that deeply distressing. Less than I do maybe a man in middle age looking at a attractive young girl, you know?
It's a thing that, it's a line the movie dances on constantly, because we know in the backs of our minds somewhere, like, it's the same reason you can watch any fiction, I think, that depicts intense, painful feeling. You know, on some level, that the actor is complicit in the portrayal. In, like, Thora Birch's parents were apparently on set because she was underage and has a topless scene. There was this whole thing at the time about how her parents were there, and they were careful, and she was in full consciousness of what was going on, and there was no exploitation. And I believe that. I mean, I also believe that people are exploited constantly in movies without their knowledge, especially if they're kids.
Yes.
So if you're making an effort, you're going to make an extra effort. And Suvari is playing someone who is projecting that sexuality, but she is also doing it herself as the actor to do it.
Totally. So where is the separation in some ways?
It makes it uneasy in a way that maybe a less sophisticated script or director or actor might not have been able to sell. Like, all the pieces are in place for us to understand what's going on and still be, we can be geeked out by it, but we understand why we need to see it narratively and emotionally in the story. And then, and when Suvari pulls it back and becomes a kid in front of you, it's jarring and shocking.
Yeah, totally. Like, at the end where I think he puts a blanket on her or something, like that's...
Yeah, she just sort of contracts.
Yeah, it's quite devastating. And then, and the way just how her character postures towards Thora Birch, and then differently to the mother. And then, so she's the most dimensional of all of them in some ways, but I think, it's so funny, like, now thinking about this movie now, what would that be?
Where would the narrative focus go if you told the story now? You suggested Benning, but
it might be her. I think it's the...
She's on the poster after all, like she's...
Yeah, it's the teenage seductress, so it's like with technology, it's expediting or making the ability to posture towards a male gaze, not to one male, but to men,
right,
through technology. Like it that terrifies me. So yes, I think it would be her and her kind of exploitation of technology to get all of the Lester Burnhams, not just Lester Burnham.
Yeah, it's almost, what was that, Drew Barrymore? Poison Ivy.
I didn't see that.
Oh, it's terrible.
Okay.
It's this icky, kind of malevolent Lolita thing that Barrymore did when she was 17 or 18, and it's just creepy. It's 1992 video bait or something. Right. Not good.
Not worth seeing.
But now in the age of social media, it would be completely different.
I think now it would be Thora Birch and I'm just referring to them as their actors. Mina Suvari probably would have killed him together. You know what I mean? It would have become a co-female revenge narrative on like killing the father, killing the patriarchy, etc., etc.
Interesting.
Because the gay angle with Chris Cooper's character, the shame surrounding that. Do I still buy that in 2017? Yes, to some degree, but I think audiences are jaded to that as being something that's worth murdering someone for.
Yeah, we see it. Well, it's because we see it every other week in some television show or other. Like that sort of the idea that it all boils down to your Zhejian self-hatred, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
But we're also seeing that in the Trump rallies, right? Like these guys hate themselves for something, and people who tend to, it's a cliche.
There has Lester Burnham's on crack with tiki torches.
Yeah, exactly. It wouldn't be Wes Bentley. Although you could probably get all of these guys together at a protest at the end of the movie on opposite sides, and then be shocked to find out, or have them be shocked to find out they're on the same side or different sides. But yeah, Chris Cooper's thing, like, it's not just that he's so deeply closeted that he can't acknowledge himself. It's also the Nazi paraphernalia. It's also the heterosexual fronting. It's also the abuse of his son. It's like so much of it is cartoon villain guy that...
Yeah, let's throw in some Nazi shit.
Yeah, and it's a horrible moment when it plays. Like, it worked at the time, but now it's just like, oh, there's this laundry list of stuff where we're watching a whodunit that's supposed to point us at this one character, but clear, like, oh, who would have guessed that the neighbor with the Nazi fixation and secret homophobic leaning or open homophobia that covers up his own sexuality? Of course it's him. Of course it's him. Like, it's not a surprise.
It's not a whodunit, like, we know.
Yeah, and that's why the thing at the end with that weird 1970s Three's Company sitcom angle on the thing that isn't oral sex, but sort of looks like the head bobbing. I don't know how to describe it.
I know what you mean.
But it's like, oh, and it's all because Don Knotts looked in the window at the wrong time and then he killed Jack Tripper. Well,
yeah, right.
It felt like a big obvious gesture to the audience, like, isn't this shocking?
Mm-hmm.
But I think in a weird way that's just how Alan Ball thinks straight people behave.
Right.
And it was less so in 6 Feet Under, where all the characters are just jerks on one level or another, but in True Blood too, where the lens that Ball uses to view normative sexuality, heterosexual suburban America, is like, it's not toxic, but he can see the stuff that's malignant, and American Beauty just sort of brings it all out. So the title is sarcastic and it's dripping with contempt for people, but the actors are still playing people, so they're going to give them humanity, and it's like it's fighting itself the whole time, which gives it this strange unspoken tension. Everybody's doing awful shit, but they have their reasons and they think they can justify it to themselves, and it isn't until somebody is pushed beyond self-justification that it all falls apart. But it's like, it's messy in a good way. That I'm thinking about shows like Enlightened, where right, too short-lived.
Oh my god, Laura Dern,
amazing performance,
fucking amazing in that.
That felt like the natural successor to American Beauty in a weird way. Just when somebody drops out of society but stays in it, stays physically present but is mentally disconnected.
Also, the tone is really kind of interesting, and like I find it quite funny.
American Beauty. Yeah.
All right, and just a combination maybe with Sam Mendes and Alan Ball, like in a different pairing, maybe would have turned out differently. But the tone is quite clever. Like the opening with the narration, some of it is just a bit cheesy now.
Well, the original concept, right?
No.
He was going to physically narrate it. He was going to be present as his own ghost.
Oh, I heard something about CGI. They were going to CGI him like above.
Oh, that would be worse.
I was like, no. I was like, I'm going to stop reading this because it's too traumatizing, even just imagining that this was an option.
One story that I've heard is that the original draft had Lester present as a ghost, narrating his own murder trial and sort of showing us things and walking us through it, like almost like a reverse, not a reverse, but almost like a Citizen Kane kind of proposition, where we flash back through his life, but he's the narrator as well as the subject. And I don't think that would have worked.
No.
I think that would be too on the nose. Maybe theatrically you could pull that off.
Wasn't it based on a play?
No, but Mendes came from the theater, so he's got that stage instinct, I think.
Right. Yeah.
But it might have been written as a play, but it's an original script, so it was conceived as
maybe I'm mistaking it because Mendes is from theater. Good point.
Yeah. And he's trying so hard to be cinematic that he actually does sort of elevate the material beyond a simple drama. Like he's got these grandiose aspirations for visual tweaks and things, and even just the thing about the plastic bag is
I know. I kind of use that as a joke now with people. Like when you watch like really bad pretentious films, I'll refer to it as like, oh, it's the paper bag floating in the wind movie. Like we know what that is.
It's earnest, though. It's like within the context of the 100%. Film, it's genuinely earnest.
And apparently, Alan Ball had a moment in Manhattan eating his sandwich on a lunch break, and he was very emotionally moved by the paper bag, right? So, for sure, was intended to be earnest, but now it's like, oh Lord.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out. Nothing in Wes Bentley's performance leads me to think he's going to be Lester's killer.
No.
But the first time watching it, I was trying to figure out if this character is supposed to be like so committed to art that he'll end up being the guy who does it.
Right.
But I think that's just a choice of Bentley's to be that intense and that focused.
Right.
And it's definitely creepy.
Yeah. His character is probably my least favorite because it's a bit too earnest. Like the rest of it has this humor in it, and then it's like him next door. It's just jarring, and it's kind of unrelenting in how intense and creepy he is.
Yeah, he doesn't crack. He has no time, even when he's supposed to be romantic.
Yeah,
it's just focus.
And I actually don't know if any teenage girl would respond to that courtship at all. Although I guess we're supposed to believe it's her desperation, etc.
Yeah, they're two broken souls who see each other and find each other across the fields of backyards or something.
Through the windows.
Yeah, it's poetic.
Yeah.
But it's also, I don't think that relationship's going to last.
Right. No, of course not.
I don't think they're going to make it to college together.
Yeah.
But it's an emotional hook that is credible because of the performers, I think, even though the script, if you're laying it out, it's like, oh, and this happens, and then this happens. You can, this is how why it was so easy to dismiss, I'm sure, at the time. It's like, and then these people follow up, and then, because it tells you where it's going.
Yeah, totally.
But that's the point of the film. It actually starts by saying, this is going to happen.
Yeah, I'm going to be dead by the end of the movie.
Yeah.
It just occurred to me now also probably why I responded to it, and the thing that I actually find this most tragic, or the most that provokes me the most, is the kind of loss of the parent-daughter relationship in its kind of pure sense, and their complete inability to speak to each other. It actually reminds me of a very strange reference, but the beginning of My So-Called Life, that Claire Danes series, which I also watched as a teenager. But the first line, Claire Danes is like running around in a towel trying to get ready for school, and the father comes out and they run away kind of embarrassed, and the voiceover is, the day that I got breast was the day my dad stopped talking to me, which, you know, charming, whatever. But similarly with this, that shift that happens between fathers of daughters in that point in life is very sad, right? And some can't get back from it. And when I'm even thinking about my own film that I just finished, and that space between fathers and daughters, that it can be difficult to get back. You know, it's obviously something I'm still drawn to.
Did you experience it yourself as a kid?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have a complicated relationship with my father, and it's not for lack of love or anything. It's just it's that gap between those two characters that just got too big, in a way that neither knows how to get back, which is so sad, you know, for a parent and a child.
Yeah. No, I know a couple of sibling relationships that sort of play the same way, where there's just enough of an age difference that it separates out, and you can convince yourself you have nothing in common with a family member, which is one of the strangest places to be in a relationship.
Yeah, because I'm fully a blood is thicker than water type person, you know?
Yeah.
But who knows? I'm sure it is not my dad's favorite movie, or a lot of parents, I would say.
Well, I can't. Yeah, I can't imagine. I mean, I don't have kids, but I can't imagine being in a position where you innocently go see a movie that everybody's talking about it and the critics are raving about it. Oh, and it just won the Oscar. And oh, yeah, by the way, it's about how you're a terrible person. Like, it's just about how you, sir, specifically, are bad. Yeah. And I'm desperately, and this is why it's going to be a men's rights speech. In a weird way, it does kind of go there.
With the men's rights angle? Oh, for sure. I mean,
it's like,
totally.
It's a weird... I was trying to figure it out if I could make an eloquent connection to it, but it's just messy. But you could come away from this movie and go, yeah, why are the white men getting picked on so much?
Oh my God, you're absolutely right. And that's kind of terrifying.
Yeah,
and like,
well, this week especially.
Pardon me?
This
yes.
week especially.
And it's in the 2017 version, is he with his Pier 1 tiki torch down at Charlottesville?
I think he's a sympathizer, but he wouldn't actually march.
Yeah.
Like, he would be the guy who sits at the bar and goes, well, they have some valid points.
Yeah,
I don't know about that. Look at me. Look what I just had to do. And that whole thing about the introduction to Lester as someone who has just been downsized and has been asked to define the reasons that he should be kept. Now it's that scene, what was the other film, where somebody's offered the chance to train his replacement. You know, you can stay on for another 2 months, but you have to train this guy how to do the job that we're not going to let you keep. And there's a sense of, you know, turn of the millennium malaise or something that runs through the film that I don't think even the film can articulate. Yeah. I think Ball knew he was onto something, but he couldn't articulate it. Yeah. And you get it in Spacey. It's expressed in his performance he's the first, this is going to sound so pretentious, he's the first millennial.
Interesting.
He's the guy who decides, I'm more important than everything around me, and I'm going to do this instead.
Right. That's a very cool observation.
Drop out, get high, work at McDonald's, just not be what anybody wants him to be.
Yeah.
And I put it out there. I like millennials. They're very good at. I love their coffees and their hamburgers.
Great coffee. Yeah. Tiny hamburgers and
So old. But yeah, no, it's a really weird movie to look back on and find all these threads that are now coming together in a way that I don't think anyone involved with the movie ever intended them to. It's just run amok.
Well, in some ways now people would maybe pick up the script and say, who gives a fuck, right?
Yeah.
Because...
why do I care about this guy?
Yeah. This, like, aging millennial. And it's like, boo-hoo kind of thing.
Yeah. I wonder what the millennial American Beauty will look like, though. I mean, we're already seeing dozens of films, but by the time this comes out, we will have seen and hopefully been done with The Only Living Boy in New York, which is the new Book of Henry, which is like this incredibly blinkered movie about a white guy who sleeps with his father's mistress because he can't sleep with the woman he really wants. Okay. It's incredibly icky to sit through. And it's somebody's idea of, this is like a modern Woody Allen movie. It's like, well, no, it isn't.
Oh, so it's like the tone is...
It tries to be, yeah. It's an upper West Side, Lower East Side kind of movie.
Okay.
It's just, it's abysmal. It opens with a dinner party where Wallace Shawn is for some reason, and a 20-year-old says New York has lost its soul, and you just want to, you're 20 or 25.
Right.
New York lost its soul before you were born, you little shit. He's living in the Lower East Side. The film, I think, was written in 1995, but it's only happening now. Okay. It just feels like that. Everybody's talking about how great the 70s were, and people mention Lou Reed, and people mention the other big influences. Andy Warhol's name comes up, and it's just like, you people are all too young to have experienced the things you're talking about. And the film just ignores it and barrels forward.
Right.
It's the kind of movie where people say make love, which is not a thing people in their 20s say. Right. Unless it's ironic.
Yeah.
Wes Bentley's character would say it.
Yes,
and it'd be real creepy. But like that's the legacy of American Beauty, is that people miss the point that it is barbed clearly, and like it is satire. It is. Right. It's supposed to be a mockery of these people. Yeah. I mean, we see how the cliche is based in contempt, but then we see the humanity beneath the contempt, which makes the film land, right? That's what we're there for. And everybody else saw that and came away with, well, I'm going to make my movie about how the suburbs are terrible. But we already know. That's not what this is about. We know that the suburbs
are terrible.
Yeah.
But even the sense of this suburb doesn't exist anymore, right?
Yeah. That's right. There's the one gay couple, right? That live across the road.
Maybe they're, probably the most... innocuous, lovely characters.
Well, they're the only ones who don't do anything awful. Right?
Yeah, totally. They say hello, good morning, and that's it. But yeah, now it's almost like, I don't know what it is. It just doesn't exist, right? The middle class is dead, or so people say.
Yeah, that's what when you started talking about how you would reframe it now, it's like, where would it be located? Where would you tell this story?
Right, because
Arizona, maybe, like somewhere far away.
Maybe. But it is, like, there's only, like, seemingly extreme wealth or, close to abject
poverty line.
Poverty, or at least from what we're seeing out of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's like the mid-range movie disappearing. There's just...
Exactly.
No one's telling stories about the middle anymore. And
everything in the middle is gone.
Yeah.
Movies, homes, income.
So fragmented. I mean, at some point, there will be a Marvel movie that introduces... like a homeless character or something, and that's how they'll be able to justify, no, we're making movies about this issue. We just have to tuck it into Iron Man 5. Mm-hmm. But, yeah, that's not where things go anymore. Yeah. I'm really interested to see where the new generation of filmmakers come from and where they go.
Yeah.
Because we're at a point where you can tell any story. I mean, for limited budgets, stuff like Good Time, the Safdie brothers film that...
I didn't see that.
It's really good. Just opened. Robert Pattinson's the lead. It's... a movie about a guy trying to do a good thing, or at least telling himself that he's trying to do a good thing, and over the course of one night he destroys the lives of everyone he touches. And it's never directly stated, but it's very clear that the fact that he is a clean looking white guy gets him out of half the problems he's in.
Oh, that's cool.
And more doors are open to him, more options are there, and whether or not he takes them, like they're presented in a way that there's 3 or 4 key black characters who just get destroyed by the end of the film because of their contact with him. And Jennifer Jason Leigh shows up as his sort of girlfriend, and it's clear that's not a really great relationship, but she's letting a lot of it slide because of who he is, and it's really interesting. And it's never spoken, it's just there.
Interesting. I gotta check that out.
Yeah. I mean, when you have time.
Yeah. Well, you saying that, even all the context of which American Beauty could be now, but maybe is it like the neighbors are black? You know, there's going to be a racial context maybe, but I mean, look at the difference of satire in something like Get Out now versus this. You know, now this like that blows this out of the water in terms of impact and weight.
Yeah. Well, and the genius of Get Out too is that it's using our expectations of horror films against us.
And that's what's so brilliant about it is how it's packaged. God, that movie's so good.
It is. It is. It's great. And it is the same kind of soul-deadening American suburb movie. I mean, it's more like country homes and stuff, but it's definitely the same social circle that this film is about, that American Beauty is about. It's just, this is what happens when a genuine outsider wanders in.
And
they're waiting for
legitimately like monsters, you know.
Yeah. The Purge too, like those films, as goofy as they are, that's the core of it, right? Like the idea of gated communities that are there to eat whoever comes in. And
interesting. So it's like maybe now American Beauty would be in a genre space.
I mean, it could be.
Yeah.
You'd have to have vampires or werewolves. I would like to see a werewolf American Beauty.
Sure. I'll get on it.
It even kind of lines up. You've got American Werewolf in the culture, right?
Exactly.
It's in your mind. I would watch that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it seems...
it was of its moment.
It was of its moment, as you say, and it was of its moment in my life. But I hold a fondness for it opening my eyes to film in that pretentious beret-wearing way. But and it took years later to become a filmmaker, but I always kind of come back to it.
So is it the concept of auteurism you never really considered?
Yeah, no, not at all. So I'm grateful to that, but of course, if I had seen it for the first time now, like I think we both agree that it still stands up to some degree, performance being one of them, but yeah, I think the relevance has kind of gotten diminished in our times.
Yeah, well, the world has changed. I was like, I'm thinking about how Noah Baumbach's movies are going to play 10 years from now.
Right.
They're wonderful and incisive and painful, and I just wonder, like, will they date? Will they hold up? Will they change? It's the same kind of condemnation of their characters. Yeah. He loves his characters even as he watches them make mistake after mistake after mistake, and I think this film, there's a lot of that there too. So then to ask the final question, like, what, if anything, of American Beauty have you borrowed or stolen or incorporated into your own creative DNA?
It's so cheesy, but it's like the thematic underpinning of the film, which is that look closer. I think that was the marketing tagline. Yeah, it's built into the set dressing at his cubicle. So for me, at a very superficial level at that age too, I was learning to look at things beyond how they were presented to me. So, I mean, it's over the top in terms of kind of hitting our heads over the hammer. Like, we get it, the blood, the rose petals, but if anything, reminding myself that there are visual tools that you can use as a filmmaker that can elevate things. Now looking at this, some of it is so exaggerated, like it's just a bit borderline cheesy. Yeah. And I think now we're in a space of maybe a little more subtlety in terms of that. But I appreciate and still do how it draws our awareness to decisions that are made in the aesthetic of the film that influence your interpretation of it. Yeah. But no, nothing... I've not done any nude teenagers in bathtubs with rose petals.
I mean, give it time.
I mean, who knows?
Never say never.
Yeah, never say never. But I think they covered that whole thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the way that Mary Goes Drowned deals with teen sexuality is pretty clear-eyed, I would say. Yeah. Just the sense that mistakes will be made, they'll be part of who you are, and then you just keep going.
Exactly.
But it's really... Like, it's rare that, and maybe it's simply because we're seeing more women make films tell their stories themselves, that there is more of a sense of, there's no, how can I put this? There's no sense that one moment can define you forever, either for good or ill. Right. There's a lot of that in American Beauty. There's the sense of it comes right up to the edge of constantly slut-shaming its characters and making them feel like they shouldn't act on their...
Totally. Yeah. And it's like, well, obviously, like the kind of dynamic, well, why wouldn't he? It's a bit too obvious, the whole thing. And Mina Suvari's character has a power that is very underexplored in terms of her characterization, that now if you were to take that role, I think it would be more than just temptress.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we're seeing her primarily through Lester's point of view, but I think now you would have to give her more, if not more agency, then at least more presence than just a body.
For sure. And in some ways, I would love to see her character sequel. What does she look like as a 40-year-old woman, and trying to reconcile her hypersexualized past with whatever arrangements or relationships she's ended up in. In fact, there's a book it's called Love in Trouble. It's by an American author named Claire Derrida.
Oh, I don't know it.
Picked it up and I was like, so I had this idea with one of my next features. I want to write like a really strong female middle-aged role. Mm-hmm. But the book is it's a memoir about how this woman is happy in her life, and she's got the 2 kids and a husband, and she totally freaks out and in her 40s kind of re-sexualizes herself and wreaks a lot of havoc. But in some ways it's like she's the Lester Burnham now. But what's great about it is it's not really conclusive, nor are the repercussions fatal in a literal or figurative way. Like, it's kind of just, she chronicles the experience and is very self-aware as to why she had it. But in the end, status quo is kind of maintained. Like, she stays with the partner he is aware of, but stays with her, which I find kind of refreshing. You know, it becomes... there's less overt judgment and kind of a moralistic way of viewing, I guess, transgressive behavior in the context of like heteronormative life. That sounded like a really terrible...
No, I get it. And, couples come apart and come back together all the time. We just never hear about it because it's not dramatic, right?
Right.
And the idea that people keep their own, private business is private business, what happens between a husband and wife and so on. You only ever hear about the couples that shatter.
Right.
And that's obviously the movies that get made because it gives people the chance to go bigger and tell those stories. But it must be more common than we think it is. Right.
Yeah, what if Annette Bening just walked by and was like, made a pass at him and then got on with her day, right?
Yeah. Of course, life goes on. The movie isn't nearly as interesting.
True.
As the dead man narrating his own tale.
Yeah, of course.
Drama.
Give the people the drama.
My thanks to Molly McGlynn, who's bringing Mary Goes Round to TIFF for its world premiere tomorrow, Saturday, September 9th at 3 p.m. at the TIFF Bell Lightbox. It's back at the Lightbox on Sunday, the 10th at 7:15 p.m. and screening one more time Sunday the 17th at 2:30 p.m. at the Scotiabank 9. I hope you wrote that down. You can find Molly on Twitter at @TheRealMollyMcG, all one word, and you can find American Beauty on Blu-ray and DVD from Paramount Home Entertainment. It's also available on iTunes and Google Play. As always, you can find me on Twitter at Norm Wilner and elsewhere on the internet at nowtoronto.com. You can also find this podcast on Twitter at Semcast, S-E-M-Cast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. If you want to leave a review on iTunes, that would be greatly appreciated. No plastic bags necessary. Just speak your feelings. Thanks for listening.